Hi everyone and welcome to the MSP studio in Bootle for this Liverpool Chamber of Commerce Voice of Business special looking at finance and access to funding in the City Region. Today we've got a panel of experts joining us to give their perspective on this particular topic and articulate their experience engaging businesses at the moment about what the sense is across our City Region in the area for businesses looking for finance to achieve their investment and growth potential. I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves first. So we'll start with Justin, please.
Hi, Paul. Justin Kyriakou, ICAEW Regional Director for the Northwest.
Thanks, Justin.
Hi, Paul. Katie Nicholson, Director of the LCR Angel Network.
Mark Borzomato, Chief Executive Officer at River Capital.
Paul Trickett, Bathgate Business Finance.
Thanks, Paul. Graham Bond, I'm the Office Managing Partner for RSM for Liverpool and Chester.
Brilliant. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. The intention for today is to give some insights about your experiences at the moment, so people viewing this particular video can get a feel for what you're doing to support businesses in the area of finance and access to funding, but also give you perspectives on what some of your clients and stakeholders are talking about at the moment. So we're going to start with a question around a phrase that Mark and Paul, you've both used previously about the missing middle and the idea that there's a proportion of businesses across the City Region who maybe aren't being serviced as well as they could be when it comes to meeting their requirements for funding. First of all, what do you think is the missing middle? Is it something that exists? And how can we overcome some of the gaps in funding provision for that particular cohort?
Do you want me to start, Mark, on that?
Feel free.
I think the thing from my perspective is communication. And I think it's communication, from the sort of the professional community, really, and delivering what access is out there away from the sort of the traditional banks. I mean, I think Liverpool, the City Region, is blessed by having, well served by having a number of different options, whether that be through Market River Capital, whether it be through the sort of LCR Angel Network, whether it be through the LCR Finance Hub, or even the likes of independents like ourselves. We've got access to 150 funding partners. So I think the products are there. I just think it's the message, it's getting that communication that, yes, the banks are the first point of call, but they can't help with everything. And I think that's where I think working with the likes of Graham, the accountants, with the sort of solicitors, with the banks, with us as a collaborative, just to get that message out there that there are other options available.
I think for me, just answer the question, does the missing middle exist? I think it does. I think that we have lots of initiatives, and they're fantastic initiatives to help businesses at various early stage cycles or startup cycles. But Liverpool is it's a city that's got a lot of heritage. It's got a lot of manufacturing background in there. It's got a lot of third generation family businesses in the region. And what we tend to see a lot of is the social media aspect, which is a lot of technology businesses, a lot of early play, looking for funding, seeking this. We get the same kind of message constantly, I think, from the kind of social media base. But for me, I think that missing middle is the 5 million, 10 million pound turnover business, often owner-managed businesses. It employs 40 or 50 staff. It doesn't benefit from a lot of those early stage initiatives. It probably isn't of a scale to benefit from some of the large national incentive schemes and aspects like that. It might not be R&D intensive, but it might be looking to adopt some technology into its operations so it can continue to compete moving forward. And those kind of businesses I always feel are a little bit ignored and a little bit unloved. So for me, does the missing middle exist? Yes, absolutely. What would I say about kind of addressing it and why does it exist? I think we've got kind of onus on all of us and everyone who Paul's just mentioned there to solve some of the supply and demand side of this by getting some ambition out there into the businesses and awareness and communication of what they can be and what offerings are available to them. And we've got to have the ambition as investors and as funders to say we want to support those elements of the business, those sectors of the business as a community as well.
So there's a question, isn't there, about the products. Ultimately, there's a raft of financial products and initiatives that are available. So I guess to some extent, what you're saying is, Paul, from your perspective, there's a raft of stuff out there, but some of it is maybe not suitable for that £5 to £10 million turnover business, if you like. But there's also a challenge around the ambition of some of these organisations, around their growth potential and their ability to maybe take risks in accessing some of the support.
I think before ambition, awareness as well. So some people, some of those businesses won't realise they're being unambitious because they're not aware of what they could be.
Is there some sort of magic bullet to this? What are some of the solutions to that?
I think, Paul, Mark touched on it about the fact that the early stage funding and the ambition. I think, interestingly enough, with Liverpool City Region, and again, Mark's touched on it, a lot of traditional, long-standing businesses, and actually that appetite to go to the next stage in terms of sourcing from other funding, rather than just debt.
Yeah.
Private equity, capital markets, it's not seen as a source, and therefore what you've ended up with, you've got some really good family businesses who are quite trepidation of actually introducing someone else into the business, when actually it could be a real leverage. And I think the size of the business, going more than 10, 20 million, 30 million turnover businesses who can actually accelerate if they brought in some outside funding. And I'm not talking about debt or a different type of debt. So I think that's probably the communication piece and the awareness.
Yeah.
Education.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say that there's, I look after the whole of the North West as a region, and one of the things that we sort of spotted right at the start of the project that I was working on is that people in the North West are slightly averse to equity. They are traditional family background. A lot of the businesses have been developed from, and there's this inherent distrust almost of equity, of bringing people into the business, thinking that if they bring a funder in or someone else, an angel, whatever, that they're going to lose control of that business and it's going to be taken away from them. The family won't have the influence that they had when they started. And actually, that's not the case. And I think that there really needs to be an educational piece around why equity is a really good option, because as we've seen through coming from COVID, the way businesses came through COVID, a lot of businesses was taking on debt on top of more debt on top of more debt. And now they're in a position where if they've got a C-bills loan or a bounce back loan, it sits on the balance sheet. It will interfere with whether or not they're able to take any more debt on. And so businesses have kind of got themselves tangled up in too much debt, it could be said. You've got some of those that are cash rich, but you've got some that have been riddled with debt now. And actually, it does prevent scale up. There are some fantastic opportunities across the whole of the North West, and Liverpool has proven to be a real sort of hotbed for innovative activity. And to not do the equity piece sometimes is self-limiting for a lot of these companies that could actually, be huge.
And I think that sort of comes back to, again, that sort of collaborative piece, and sort of you talk about education. It's about the likes of us, as when we're sort of speaking with businesses and sort of understanding what their needs are, what their requirements are. I think one of the things that Liverpool do really well compared to other regions is working collaboratively, whether it be an accountant speaking with another accountant, whether it be funders like Bathgate speaking with River Capital. If we're identifying an opportunity that might not necessarily be a debt piece for us, it's having that sort of knowledge and that sort of education to say to the client, listen, equity could be the way forward, and then it's bringing in the likes of Mark and his team to sort of speak with them, and then ultimately bringing the likes of an accountant in to sort of talk about sort of how that sort of works for them, and then the lawyers can come in. So I think it's that just collaborative piece, and I think that's one of the things that we as a City Region do really well.
Justin, you talked there as well about the prevailing economic circumstances at the moment, and the impact of COVID and the accumulation of debt. We've heard a few stories here about businesses maybe lacking a little bit of ambition, trust or awareness around equity as an option. Just wonder if you all feel what the balance might be between, that sort of systemic, I'm a family business, I trust having complete ownership myself and I want to continue on that path, versus we've just been through a huge economic shock and actually at the moment I can't even think about pursuing equity. What's the balance here between the circumstances that exist as of today in 2023 versus the systemic structure of our local economy?
That's a really good question, Paul. Certainly what we're seeing is that from an ICAEW perspective, so we've got about 3,000 members operating in the Liverpool area, and something like 11,000 across the northwest. We have seen that initially there are a number of cash-rich businesses coming out of the back end of COVID who are looking to make investments, but we've certainly started to see the number of investments has started to slow down. It's still good, but it has slowed down somewhat because people within recent months seem to have taken on a bit of a recession mentality where cash is king. People are wanting to sit on that. People are starting to put back some of those investment opportunities or some of those investment pieces, and so it is. As usual, it's an ever-changing picture. There is reluctance, but actually, we listened to the Bank of England and the OBR updates last week, which are seem to be much more positive than if you were speaking to members and businesses locally. That there seems to be a slightly more negative picture and a slightly more hesitant picture within businesses. So hopefully things will start to move forward, and if that happens, people will start to look to make those investments. But again, it all comes down to confidence, and confidence over the last 12 months and the disruption, the inability to be able to make plans because of the certain chopping and changing within government policy has made it very difficult for people to actually make the right decisions that they need to at this time to particularly invest in the business.
Yeah, and your confidence index has demonstrated that in recent quarters. I know our quarter economic survey has revealed the same. I think the RSM MMBR has demonstrated similar sort of confidence levels and outlook, and that inevitably has a challenge, doesn't it, to what businesses are willing to explore and take risk on. Katie, from your perspective, Justin made reference to angel investments and such. Obviously, you're curating the LCR Angel Network. Talk to us a little bit about where you see that developing in the current economic climate.
Yeah, so just to pick up on what you said about education, firstly, I think that really communication and education is really important. And obviously, you've got those businesses that are family businesses, second, third generation. SMEs are kind of like the backbone of, they're the solid employers. And I think it's really important to make sure they're educated and we communicate to them what the options are, but there isn't a need for them to necessarily take on risk if they don't feel comfortable with that. In terms of the Angel Network, really we're kind of looking to reinvigorate the work that's already been carried out by the likes of MSIF and Brabner's. That's been going for about 3 or 4 years now, and we've got some solid commitment and funding from the Combined Authority, which is fantastic, and MSIF to enable us to do that. And so the mandate really is to go out and create a solid investor network that will enable small businesses, startups, scale-ups in the Liverpool City Region to get that vital support to help their businesses thrive.
And in terms of sort of the time, we talked about the prevailing economic circumstance at the moment. We've all talked about education. What would you expect people, maybe operating their business to come to you with? What do they need to really maximise the benefit of your network?
I think really a solid understanding of why they want to take on angel investment, what the risks are, of course, the financials, the business plans. I think, for me, I see the LCR Finance Hub as a great asset. Having, worked in other, regions, I think that having that available to businesses in Liverpool is fantastic because a lot of the companies don't, they can't, at the start, they don't have the capital to go and pay professional services. So to have access to that, to be able to come and say, these are my plans, these are my forecasts, and be comfortable because they've had that service from the Finance Hub is great. And I think that's a real asset.
And in terms of the Finance Hub, Mario, obviously very close to the finance hub. Where do you see the benefit of that linking into the other people on this table? How can that be strengthened to achieve what it's designed to do?
Well, the finance hubs are an additional offering that for LCR, so it shouldn't compete with commercial forces you touched on already. Businesses should be able to appoint advisors and help our professional services community should do it. This is for the micro businesses, the very early stage businesses, which need a little bit of support. Probably a little bit of financial acumen might be missing in the team, or it might need just a little bit more input, and that's where I see it sitting. I do also think we've got to flag it as well as for those early stage businesses. It's an excellent signposting offering to send them in other directions, because I don't know all the offerings that are offered by the City Region, but more often than not they do. To say, look, have you spoken to X, Y, or Z? So I see it as a bit of a differentiator, if I'm honest. Lots of other angel networks in regions and things like that. I think the finance hub is actually a little bit of a differentiator, which helps underpin lots of other offerings as well. So the whole ecosystem is starting to mature a little bit, would you say? Yeah, it is. I think we kind of keep going around on points, don't we, of communication. You've always got that big challenge, haven't you, about greater good of the region as against greater good of your own organisation. Yeah. And how do we make sure that we work together and pass things on at the right time? And I think that's where we've got to get to. This kind of runway is one of the things that I'll always go on about. The runway is it might start with an angel network, it might start with a finance hub who directs somebody to an angel network, who then directs somebody to the next stage of the funding. And conversation, I'm not kind of anti-bank in any way here. I think the banks are really important in providing funding, and then there's alternative funding, and then there is equity funding. There's all blends in there. It's about all communicating and passing things on at the right point, and giving that business a real runway towards being successful. Some businesses at the moment mightn't start as early as the angel network. They might already, I'll go back to what I said before, that middle piece, they might already be at a certain stage in their journey, but we need to get them onto a runway again to try and make sure they become all they can be.
I think it's been touched on and re-emphasised then is about the collaboration piece, and I think that actually, from a City Region point of view, we're pretty good at that. We are. From whether there be different accountants, we're all working together. It's not competition; it's collaboration. Yeah. And if we can all do that more and work for the benefit of those companies, and they understand that, then things will move on from there.
I was just going to say, I think there's a lot of value in saying that if we get an opportunity that is not for us at this stage, being able to say, but we've got somebody at the finance hub or an angel network that may be able to support you, then I think that's a real sort of good added value. And then they're sort of saying, well, that's and then when it comes to sort of 6 months, 12 months down the line, then they'll think, well, Paul offers some great advice or Mark, and it's again, it comes back in spades. I always find, and I think, like Graham said, we do that really, really well in the City Region in terms of just not being precious about it. It's about you want to grow and help that business to grow and support. I think we do that really, really well. So,
Justin, you've got regional perspective, so it's really interesting to.
I was just listening to what the gentleman was saying, and it's fantastic that there is this sort of level of support that's there for Liverpool businesses. And I suppose for many businesses who might be watching this, would be thinking, right, okay, well, where do I start? Who do I speak to? As we know, that European funding has been moved away from a lot of the business support pieces, such as the growth hubs and whatnot, and we'll start to see the end of the LEPs in the next 12 months. And so it's really important, even more so now, that we actually start to show a real collaborative front on a business support service. So the role of a chartered accountant, for example, can be very much in signposting. The relationships that we have with funders and amongst each other is absolutely vital at the moment, because when that support service isn't quite as much there, because a lot of these growth hubs have been fantastically successful at supporting businesses over the last few years. So it's really important that we're all there and we're singing to the same hymn sheet. We're sharing contacts, but ultimately, Liverpool Chamber have a massive part to play in this as well, because as someone who ran a business and owned a business in the past myself, whenever I needed to sort of speak to somebody, you look for an anchor point, and who is that sort of, that most important signposting organisation. And the one thing that we've all got in common here is that the Liverpool Chamber can point to our various different support services and how we can help with people. So I think that's really important to see, is that, it is collaborative, but at the same time, it's consistent. Yeah. And that everyone's getting the consistent information being signposted, and that if anyone watching this thinking, this sounds fantastic, but where do I start? That you have a starting point and you can go from there.
And I think, I was going to say, I think that's the key, is getting the message. How do we get that message out there? And I think it starts, with, again, we do our best to get out amongst the professional community and talk about, what we offer, but also what the rest of the region offers. But I think there's still professional advisors that aren't speaking out and aren't, saying to their clients, listen, we've got this abundance of resource, we need to sort of explore it and start sort of communicating with them. It's just, how do we get that message out there? And like Justin was just saying then, the Chamber are great in terms of, getting the message in terms of what cash flow options. And I'm just talking about Bathgate, on our own, we get, getting all of our sort of blogs and our newsletters out there to sort of, spread the word. But it's how can we work collaboratively to get that message out there more and to sort of spread the word of what's a great resource that we've got.
And on that, I think one of the things we've got to do is let's humble's a great thing, but let's let people know what we do well. Yeah. And I don't mean we at the table or I mean we generally. Yeah. We need some success we need success stories that people are good to talk about, something which comes from an angel network, which goes to the an equity funder or whatever, or a business which goes from X to Y over a period of time of taking on some financing and that. We've got to let people know about that. And I'm of a view, we don't compare ourselves to kind of other regions. Don't compare. We are what we are. Let's have our success stories.
We do hide our light under a bushel.
Yeah.
The city region does not.
Absolutely.
There's some fantastic businesses there, and they just carry on. And I think in many ways, like Mark said, we need to explain that more, that there is success there already, and they can be even more successful.
Well, let's make sure within this session, because this is an opportunity for us to talk a little bit about some of that. And again, I'm always conscious that there's elements of confidentiality that may exist with particular clients. But can we maybe spend a couple of minutes talking about some of those successes? Because it's often said sometimes, the city region is one of the expressions I don't particularly like. We punch above our weight, and which I always think almost makes it sound like we're underdogs and we don't have a right to have success. And I think it's the wrong approach to take. But at the same time, the suggestion that we hide our light and such leads to a couple of conclusions. One, we're not articulating some of the successes that exist either within our midst or because of our contribution, or we don't have any. Now, Graham, you've made the point there that we do have successes. So talk to us a little bit about what the successes are, without necessarily, you don't have to be completely specific about individual cases, but where are those successes, and thinking about people who may see this, who are owning a business or operating a business, how can they take inspiration from some of those successes that exist?
Yeah, it's difficult without actually naming names. I can think of one particular one as a client. Well, there's a couple. Clients and people we've had interactions with were actually, and people say about world class, and unfortunately it is actually used quite a lot. But there's one particular company, probably the oldest on Merseyside, which actually from a global point of view is ahead of the game in terms of what they produce. I've got another client that the amount of import, export straight out, which actually lends itself to the free port, and we can pick that up later. They are the people to go to. So I think that there are businesses, and then of course actually, and I deal with a lot of life sciences, pharmaceutical businesses. You only have to look at North Liverpool, at South Liverpool, across that piece, where you've got Sakaris there, the old Evans, but actually from a biomanufacturing point of view, this is where it's actually at from a global perspective, and we don't sing and shout about that enough, we just get on with it.
So there's a piece there around almost the place marketing and making a shift in terms of some of the case studies, some of the celebrations that we make about, as you said, what is world class, but there is potential, or maybe very real world class activity taking place that we're maybe missing when it comes to the marketing of Liverpool as a place to do business.
Everyone says about, and we've talked about technology, life sciences. Everyone else in the country and around the world is saying pretty well the same thing, digital. Yeah. You have to drill it, in my mind, you have to drill it down to actually where is. And I've already said about manufacturing from a life sciences point of view. It's actually not just life sciences, it's actually further down. It's a subsector of it. And it's the same on the digital, the gaming side. You have to drill down. That's where we concentrate on and should shout about.
Yeah. Paul?
Yeah, I had an opportunity. Again, this brings in the communication and the collaborative side of it. I get a call from an accountant late on a Friday night, and he had this client who was a sort of a restoration property business. They had a sort of an ongoing invoice finance facility that was about to draw down. There was delays in that, which impacted the money that they were going to draw down the first tranche to support a payment to HMRC VAT payments. And literally, again, the accountant signposted us to us. Also the bank, which, again, we had a call on the Monday. We were going to signpost us as well, which was great, tick. And we were able to basically get that funding approved via ourselves, via our own book, to the point where it was paid out. The next, I think it was 400,000. We managed to draw down within a space of a week to support that business. But that business, again, wouldn't have known of those necessarily if they hadn't been signposted by both the bank and the accountant. So again, it was great for us. It was great just to show how quickly we could act as well.
I just pick up on that as well, Paul. So to some extent, presumably the relationship that the business had with the partner organisation helped that process through in terms of the speed and the comfort that was provided in terms of the facility.
Yes.
Now, we've talked earlier about the infrastructure and the banks were mentioned earlier. We know that generally there's been a reduction in sort of forward-facing bank-based individuals who are working with SMEs, if we can put it that way. Is this something that we need to think about in terms of how the businesses build a relationship with funders or with people in the professional business service sector who can make those introductions and also provide some of the assurance that if they're going with a request for their business, that there's an element of trust involved? How is that achieved?
Well, I suppose speaking from an accountant's perspective, I'd say that from a business, your accountant should be your most trusted, advisory. Certainly, this has been accelerated during the COVID years when lots of chartered accountants were actually offering almost FD support services for the businesses that they were working for and working with. Chartered accountants are becoming much more consultative. They're becoming much more advisory, and that's how we see the sort of the future of the role of a chartered accountant changing. And there is I suppose there's a need for the chartered accountants to be able to signpost, to be able to understand where people's businesses are going. So that the concept of a chartered accountant being just a bean counter or a bookkeeper are long gone. And actually, if you're after that trusted business advisor, your chartered accountant should be able to signpost you to everyone on this table. They should know what's happening in that local landscape. And I suppose many good chartered accountants will say they actually have a duty of care to make sure that as a business, it's not just about, well, if you want to go and get money, get it off the bank. There is this whole sort of landscape and ecosystem that can help support that.
And Katie, from your perspective, I suppose as you're building your syndicates and such and you're curating them, I guess trust is an integral part of those relationships. And, again, how do you see that working?
Yeah, I think it's really key to have that connectivity and that communication. Again, going back to that, I think in the past there's been kind of anecdotes around the example of, say, investment or wealth managers who might not necessarily want to start encouraging clients to go and do angel investing and that kind of thing. But the way I see it is it's really important, from my point of view, to really offer your clients that diversity and like almost a helping hand and that trusted support to go and look at various options and really kind of establish those strong relationships and to enable people to do that.
I mean, just picking on something that Justin mentioned, you asked about there. and I might be a little bit, you'll give me some more up-to-date statistics than I'm about to give you now, but there used to be, the old line was, a third of businesses looking to raise finance won't ask the question because they don't know who to ask. A third of businesses won't ask the question because they expect the answer to be no. So we're only getting to a third of them.
Yeah.
And we're all as collaborative with anything that we want, that we find, but that to me says there's 2/3 of them we're not even finding. And that goes back to your point then about, you know, who do those businesses ask that question of? Where do they enter this, into the ecosystem? Where do they enter it? How does the ecosystem reward them? If their touch point happens to be person X, you know, and the introduction is to person Y, that's the ecosystem rewarding them that they've dropped into, really. It's all on trust again, as you said before. But for me, that's, you know, 2/3 of businesses don't ask the question. That's educational bits, and that's why, you know, we've all got to have those conversations which are just educationally focused.
I mean, it's interesting you say that, Mark, because of course, how many times clients-wise, they've had the word no, whether it be from a bank or actually from a fund, an angel funder. Yeah, actually, it's no but.
Yeah.
You know, the thing is, it doesn't mean to say no now. It might be no now, but actually, there's also, from a banking relationship, we're doing a lot of debt advisory work at the moment. Banks have different appetites. So it's not just, right, that's the banking industry, I'm going to stop there. There's others.
As to equity investors, or angel investors, or wherever it is. The likelihood is that person that you speak to might do 4 or 5 investments a year. Yeah. So they're trying to find the reason to do one. It isn't getting a rejection, it's getting an acceptance. Everything else is... Everything else is just needs to look in alternative directions.
Go on. You go.
No, go on.
You're right. And again, I think from us saying about the educational piece, one of the things that we sort of tend to do, and I said before, we try to get out amongst the professional community, is actually sit with these, you know, with the accountants and get a team together and talk about, again, the things that we do well, so the good news stories, the case studies, the people we're working with, but talking about the products as well, giving them an educational piece about, it might not necessarily be a working capital loan, it might be something like a trade finance, it might be an invoice finance, whatever it may be. You know, it's just being, sitting with as many, and we've done it ourselves with River Capital, we've been in there and we've talked about what we do, they've talked about what, so we're sharing knowledge as well, it's that. And again, coming back to the sharing knowledge, collaboration, communication, but again, it's just trying to get that message out there.
And I think, Paul, just on success story kind of elements and that, I think the other thing that hits me is there's an expectation. There's an expectation the answer is going to be no. I see a lot of businesses who are, you know, 20, 30-year-old businesses, 40 or 50 manufacturing, with a little bit of support and a little bit of awareness, creating a bit of ambition. Those businesses grow 1 or 2% faster. The margins improve 1 or 2%. We bring in some expertise around it, be it finance, be it, you know, other skills in the business. Overheads, and when you add all that up, you're growing 20% year on year, and you're suddenly a high growth business. And that was creating the awareness to create the ambition, and then between the network, finding the solution which got the outcome there. I think they're the success stories, you know, as much as world class and as much as, you know, early, and they've all got the part to play. I am not saying that they aren't all part of the ecosystem in any way, but, you know, I like that to me is a success story from somebody who expects a no and is now sitting at a business growing 20% year on year.
And we've had discussions, you know, with Business Policy Committee, and like it was about, you know, supporting indigenous businesses to sustain themselves and grow, and to some extent, that is as big a success, isn't it?
Apprenticeships coming through the programme, skills going up, you know, employment numbers going up. It feeds.
It does,
You've talked about, we seem to be pulling a couple of themes now. So we've talked about communication, we've talked about education, two really important things. But I think also what we can't forget is leadership. Leadership within these businesses, leadership from a business support service perspective and that advice piece, but also helping to the leadership within these organisations to develop as well, to have the confidence to make certain decisions, to look at equity, to look at different funding options. I think that's really important. One of the things that we certainly saw throughout the dark days of COVID was lots of businesses who did survive pivoted, changed, adapted, and they're able to do that through good leadership and strong advice as well. So again, I suppose, whilst it's not necessarily a tangible thing, to be able to support businesses, to offer that leadership opportunity and to help develop leaders within the businesses themselves will also stand the business in good stead moving forward. So it's not just about, putting the money into, say, buy capital equipment or anything. It's actually about developing that workforce so they can actually take those decisions as well. I think that's a really important factor that you probably need to think about.
And Graham and Paul, in terms of leadership, you're meeting businesses almost every day. What does the general feel about the leadership of businesses that you're working with? Are they developing that mindset that Justin's touched upon there? Is that starting to come through again? Thinking about the context of the economy as it is, where is the level of leadership in this space at the moment?
I'm going to answer it slightly differently. Like politicians.
That's your right. That's right. Yeah.
No, but it got me thinking about the how many times, and I'd pose a question probably not to the table, more to the audience. How many times do companies, because they're operationally focused, get stuck in? How many times are they standing back and doing a strategic view of their business? Also, who are they mentoring? Who, we can use the words non-executives being brought on, but who are they standing back and talking to? I know, Justin, you mentioned from a chartered accountant's point of view, trusted advisor, but actually, who are they standing back talking to about where the business is going?
Yeah.
Because that can only add to the blend from a leadership perspective. I think that you see it when a transaction occurs, when there's an investment, people get brought on. Mark, an investment from River will probably initiate that, but people should be doing that in advance.
Yeah.
So I think I'd pose that question.
Yeah, so the foresight within the business and almost that headspace to think, right, where are we actually going to take this? So you're almost meeting the funder halfway. Katie, you talked earlier about what you would expect, someone coming to your network to have ready and available. And I guess it is that sort of idea and almost operational plan in your mind about where your business is going and what you need to use finance to give it that kickstart to achieve strategic goals. Yeah. Paul, what's your take?
I think we've seen a lot of business owners, high growth businesses, younger business owners who have come into these businesses, and again they've got this idea and it's taken off, but they haven't necessarily got that sort of finance acumen. They don't necessarily they may have a bookkeeper that's helping them another day or two a week. So it's having that, again, it's coming back to what we've just talked about before, having that collaborative approach where we can say, we can introduce you to an accountant to sort of help to advise. We can bring the likes of George from the finance hub to help maybe sort of on some cash flows perhaps, or giving them options around what options funding wise that can help to grow the business. And I think it's just it's being able to sort of help them grow and help them develop as leaders.
Bit of a challenge point for you as well. There's obviously been quite a lot of free money available. We touched on European funding. The support offered in the city. There's a price on that as well. Do you get the sense that the quality is appreciated, or the cost of that quality is appreciated by the consumer, ultimately the business owner that may need to invest in that kind of advice?
There's a couple of things on that. Probably there's too much. It needs consolidating more, in terms of the source of funding. I always find though that of course actually, if it's free, in inverted commas, is it valued? And I think sometimes you need that. Yes, there's a leg up in terms of getting that advice, but actually that value, you need to get that value. It's not, you have to pay. You pay for what you get.
Yeah, I think also a lot of the things that I've seen are that, firstly, succession planning. So people that are in those second and third generation businesses, what does that look like for them? And then coming back to, this probably needs editing because I've lost my train of thought, but so I think with the support, there's a lot of programs in place that are funded and are free, but I think that a lot of the people running those businesses often find themselves, they're so entrenched and at the forefront of day to day and growing and scaling that they can't step away from their business to go to that 12, 18 week course, give an afternoon, because week in, week out, something gets goes off track and they're fighting fires on the front line, rather than having that time to step back and look at the wider picture.
So the message ultimately from you all is really find the time somehow to take that step back, to horizon gaze, but also to consider aspects such as succession planning, such as growth potential, and really take the time that you can to have that helicopter view ultimately.
Yeah. You coined the phrase, to spend less time in your business and spend more time on your business. It's not to be sniffed at, because people have been saying it for a long time. I think that is really important, to be able to take that objective view of where you're going. And as the panel was just saying, just because it's free doesn't mean it's right for you. Yeah. We see lots of businesses, and I speak to lots of different growth companies and hubs who are saying, well, we get lots and lots of emails from people every day, always looking for something that's free.
Yeah.
So again, if all you're looking for is free funding, then are you actually really thinking about what it is that you need for your business at this minute, or are you after just a bit of free money? Yeah. So again, it's think about what you actually need as an organisation, be it scaling up, be it sort of pivoting, changing direction, and look at it from that perspective. Not just a case of, right, okay, well, that funding pot there, I'll have a bit of that.
It's the difference between cost and value, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
People look at the cost, not the value that income in. And actually, I only understand that at the moment, because for 3 years, it's been a real battle after battle after battle, perma-crisis or whatever's dropped into the dictionary now, and what have we. As you touched on before, there's likely an element of debt in there from some of the government schemes that came in place. Then we've got this confidence at the moment. Confidence is pretty low at the moment. I think, in fact, it's probably the lowest I've seen it. You want to go back to 2008 and things like that, because it's the unpredictability. Nobody can put a set of forecasts up and say, I'm confident in them. And that's where we need good leadership. Therefore, of its reaction, it's pivoting. The most overused word in Britain now, pivoting. Never used it. But it's pivoting. It's reflecting changing environments quickly. But I do think there's a massive amount of personal resilience. I'm not on about business, personal resilience for a business owner who's had the last 3 years, who's sitting with debt on his balance sheet, her balance sheet, that they didn't want. Got to work a way through that in an environment where there's no element of certainty on projections going forward. That comes all back to individuals' leadership's resilience, kind of touches it for me.
Katie?
Yeah, I was just going to pick up on the point of the free, education and support. I think that from my side, at the very early stages with the founders, I've seen some people who, for them, those free programs, the likes of Gather, programs provided by LCR, they've been absolutely instrumental in giving those people the confidence to get going. And they've actually, these might be solo founders that are, they do have plans to grow their business, but they're very early stage in comparison to some of these kind of, long-standing businesses. So I think there is definitely a need for that support to be provided, and for people to be able to access that, because there is a whole host of kind of the business community that do benefit greatly from those.
Brilliant. Graham, you mentioned Freeport earlier. In the context of the difficulty for strategic leadership, horizon gazing, what's your view in terms of things like Freeport, industrial zones, investment zones that have just been announced in the recent budget? How can businesses get their head around understanding these, almost macroeconomic developments, and then aligning their business to benefit from them?
Well, if I kick off with the Freeport, because that term has been around and it's certainly been around in Liverpool for a number of years, but it's a different one all again, because actually it's not necessarily a port, it's a zone, and covers such a wide area of the northwest, and actually is just facilitation of exporting, importing, and then there's tax incentives within it. I think that then is actually about communication, making sure businesses are aware that it's available. That's on certainly from an advisory point of view, but also for companies to get out and find out what's going on. Could have been a bit clouded because of the investment zones which were announced last week. They're all I wouldn't say much of the same, but the similar incentives. but people just need to communicate, explain what it's all about, and take the benefit from them.
You've all talked about personal resilience, and can I just say you've demonstrated great personal resilience getting to this point in the session. So let's think about landscape and outlook to finish off. So we've touched upon some of the challenges. We've touched upon some of the things that businesses should be looking at doing to enable themselves to be prepared for accessing finance to grow their business, or even just to sustain their business and incrementally move forward. What do you all have at your disposal to be able to support businesses to achieve some of this? This is a great opportunity, hopefully, for you to articulate what you do, how you do it, and how those businesses, potentially watching this session, can understand what you have to offer. So I'm very happy to open it up to anyone who wants to go first on this one.
I don't mind.
Well, since everyone's been so reluctant, I'll jump in my sales pitch first. In the Liverpool City Region, we've got 6,000 chartered accountants. So we've got an awful lot of scope, an awful lot of coverage. 50% of those will be working in some fantastic practices such as RSM. And a great many of them actually work within businesses as well. So they're very well connected, they're very well supported. Their business is your business. And they have been supporting businesses in the local area for well over 150 years. So we've got a great foundation to be able to do that. The relationships exist. And if you want to change your business, if you want to grow your business, if you want to develop opportunities, then I would always say the first person to talk to is your chartered accountant. Because, whatever happens, they have the right level of experience. They've seen it, they've done it, and they can advise you the right way to move your business forward.
Brilliant. Thanks, Justin. Katie.
So in terms of the LCR Angel Network, I think that we've got this great opportunity. We've secured funding for 5 years now, which £1 million of funding, which is really going to enable the organisation to kind of create some solid foundations and to grow, to create some solid opportunities for investors to come together, people that are passionate about Liverpool, that have done well from business in Liverpool and now want that opportunity to give back and support up and coming businesses. And I also think looking at the wider landscape, there's a lot of new initiatives that have been launched as well that sit alongside that, mainly in the kind of digital health tech space, the likes of Baltic Ventures, Liver Labs, the new seed fund, that kind of thing. And I think that that's just kind of shows the opportunity and the breadth of everyone working together to enable businesses to kind of grow and support those businesses to thrive locally.
So from my perspective, we've got some fantastic entrepreneurs and owner managers in the region, and what we look to do is fuel their ambitions. Goes back to where we started this whole thing out. What are those ambitions? They're different for different people. Some people want to just run their own business on a small scale. Other people want to be world class, and we look to provide a funding package up to £2 million is kind of our sweet spot to help them move along that journey and develop that journey further. We blend our debt and equity. We work with other investors, Bathgate and others, and we're keen to make sure that we, yes, we provide the funds, we provide the support, we provide the expertise. We've got 16,000 businesses or something. I can't remember the numbers. Lots of businesses that we backed on. We've been through the journey, as you touched on before. You've been through the journey, the awkward adolescent years of growing up and scaling up, and that's where we look to focus our funding.
Brilliant. Thanks, Boz. Paul.
And I suppose where we fit in, again, we've got a great team, really experienced team. As I mentioned before, we've got about 150 sort of funding partners that we work with that can sort of lend, whether it be sort of working capital, whether it be invoice finance, property finance, merchant cash advance funding. We've got the products and the tools there. As I say, we've got the experience. We've got the relationships with the businesses we've worked with, sort of supported, and we've sort of developed long-term relationships with. We're sort of open to collaborating with other, sort of funders locally. So we work quite really close with George at the Finance Hub. We work with Mark and his team at River capital, and again, we've got a close, really well network, so we're a close network with a lot of accountants, so we can sort of bring accountants in, we can bring sort of FDs in, we can sort of help, we can provide a sort of a joined up approach, and we sort of work with signposting other advisors, so yeah, that's where we can sort of help businesses.
Brilliant. Thanks, Paul. Go ahead.
Okay. I think RSM being a sort of major global firm of auditors, tax advisors, consultants, that said, we look at it very much from a local, national, international viewpoint. And I take a great heart that we will take companies from pretty early stage through their growth journey, through transactions and beyond. And I think that at all levels, we invest very much in the city region. I think it's a really important, and I think, as I say, it's about taking companies on that journey.
Brilliant. Well, thank you everyone for your contribution today. Hopefully, our viewers have got a great deal of insight from your observations and your experience. We'll make sure that all of your contact details are shared with the publication of these videos, and I'm sure people will take advantage of that opportunity. Thank you everyone for watching today's session. Really hope you found some really insightful things to help you move your business forward in the appropriate way. This has been Liverpool Chamber's Voice of Business session on finance and access to funding, and we look forward to seeing you at a future session.